That's when you're good to go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Okay. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome everyone to tonight's program. We are reviewing a book by the name of Double-Edged Slavery. This book is written by Imam Lonne Ahmed. And last week we started off with a brief introduction to the topic of this book. And tonight's review, inshallah, will be going over the first two chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2. And so hopefully everyone had a chance to review the two chapters so that we can all participate in the discussion. So hopefully I did a good enough job of giving an overview of this book and more importantly the tone and the objective of this book. And for those who may have missed the first session, Imam Lonne Ahmed is giving what I would describe as a social and psychological analysis of Islam in America today. And so he looks at Islam from the perspective of the convert Muslim, and more specifically the African American convert Muslim, who by and large makes up the majority of the converts in North America today. So let's just jump right into it, inshallah, so that we can save time for open discussion. I would ask that someone keep track of time so that I don't talk for too long and then not leave enough time for discussion. So I would like to stop at around 7, let's say 7:50. So I'll give about 20 minutes or so. Please don't allow me to go past 7:50 so that we can have time for discussion. So in the beginning of chapter 1, Imam Ahmed, he goes right in on the heart of the problem. And he says in a statement that we have a problem on our hands in Muslim America. And it's a problem of race, of marginalization, and what he describes as gross misinterpretation of sacred texts. And so that is really the crux of the book. He goes on to talk about how Muslims who have accepted Islam in North America are just as legitimate, just as valid as Muslims who may have come or may have been born in predominantly Muslim countries. And more specifically, he says that there are over 1 billion Muslims in the world today, or on the planet Earth today. And just because a person is new to Islam does not mean necessarily that we don't have a valid perspective of Islam. And I'll quote him on page 2. He says, however, being new to the religion does not preclude one from having an accurate understanding of the religion. It does not mean that you can't understand the religion of Islam better than someone who has been Muslim for many years. And I think many of us can relate to that statement, because we have all, those of us who have converted to Islam, who are recent converts to Islam, a majority of us have come to Islam because of our, obviously it's a blessing. It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are Muslim. But many of us have come to Islam through knowledge, right? So we have heard the call of Islam. We have heard the dawah, and oftentimes we've read the Quran or we've read the Sirah, or we've met a Muslim and we accepted that calling of our own volition. In other words, this was not something that our parents imposed upon us or someone else imposed upon us, but rather it was from an aspect of reading, of understanding, and a voluntary acceptance. And that gives us a very unique and a very genuine understanding of Islam. He goes on to make another very important point, which is that African Americans or Black Muslims in this country, many of us are descendants of Muslims. Many of us have many generations back, whether we realize it or not, our forefathers were Muslims. And there's a certain a link or lineage of Islam in our background that perhaps has played a role or played a part in our own acceptance of Islam. And he goes on to make a point that African American Muslims struggle to get back to Islam. And we have tried Islam as Moors. For those of us who are familiar with the Moorish Science Temple, we've tried as ex-slaves to become reconnected to our faith through the Nation of Islam. And many of us who have found ourselves, unfortunately, incarcerated, accepted Islam. And he goes on to say that in the 40s, some of the first Muslim missionaries to propagate Islam in America were from among the Ahmadiyya movement. So we have tried, African Americans have tried the various flavors of Islam, whether, and I mentioned a few, the Moorish Science Temple, Nation of Islam, the Ahmadiyya movement. So we've done our part as far as trying to make the hijrah or the journey back to Islam. And that is a very important point that should not be overlooked, because that part of our journey plays a very important role in who we are as Muslims today. And he says that we cannot afford, nor should we allow, the great legacy of the Muslim struggle in America to be reduced to the length of a man's pants, or the woman wearing niqab or gloves. And nor should we sit by and allow our history to be rewritten without our sojourn taken out of the narrative. So we have, from the very beginning of Islam in the US, been at the forefront of dawah, and to this day, African American Muslims represent the largest group of converts to Islam in America. And still at the onset, we have to realize that the flag of Islam has no ethnic-based entitlement. So he's making very plain and very clear that while the struggle of African Americans or Black Muslims to come to Islam is significant, this does not in any way lend us to any advantage or disadvantage to Muslims who either migrated or were born into Islamic households. So he asks a very important question in the first chapter. And the question is, does this mean that Islam is a racist religion? And he answers the question, certainly not. But know, beloveds, that racism is alive and well in Muslim America. So he's making a very poignant point that even though we're all Muslim, we're all striving to practice our faith and to worship Allah in the best manner that we can. In terms of our treatment of one another and our interactions with one another, we definitely still have traces, if not overt, racism in Islam. And he also raises a very important question or point, that the current state of Islam in American Muslims is similar to or likened to colonialism as it was for African Americans in America. So that is my summary of chapter 1. And so we'll move to chapter 2, inshallah. Chapter 2 is covering why African American and Muslim convert community are at risk. Why he believes that the African American Muslim and the convert community at large are at risk. And he starts off by saying that this community, the convert community and African American community in particular, are at risk and have been for a very long time. So he starts off by saying and reinforcing the point again, that African Americans, by and large, make up the largest part of the convert community in North America, even though that dynamic may be changing. So he covers a point that although Islam has been in this country for many decades, we can find that even there have been traces of Islam from the very beginning, when slaves were brought over, or Africans were brought over as slaves or enslaved here in North America, that they brought their Islam with them. That this was something as old as the country itself, or this country itself. But when you think about Islam as a Jamaat, where the Muslims are able to freely and openly practice our faith, it did not happen probably until the 30s or 40s, that the Islamic community began to take form and shape in this country. And if you think about it, so in the past 70 or 80 years of history in this country, of Muslims in this country, we still have very few generations of American-born Muslims in this country. Most of the Muslims who convert to Islam have not been able to translate or transfer this deen or this faith to later generations, and this is a serious problem. He goes on to say that for most converts to Islam, it stops with the one who converted and does not go any further than that. So that's a scary thing. That means for many of us who are in this chat room, or many of us who are in the community today, we still have not figured out an effective way to transfer this down to our children and future generations. So he goes a little bit deeper to say that clearly it's evident that there are two distinct different Muslim Americas. One is comprised primarily of immigrants from Muslim countries, and the other, and their children, and the other consists of American Muslims who convert to Islam and their children. And he says that American Muslims, and in particularly African American Muslims, have been made to feel that we are not allowed, or should not make a distinction of ourselves as such, as African American Muslim, but we should just focus on Islam in general. He says that anyone starting an organization with the name African American Muslim or African American in it, period, is basically attacked immediately. And he says this is the programming which African American Muslims have succumbed to over the past half century, 50 years or more. There's no harm in maintaining one's ethnic identity or accepting who you are, your history, or acknowledging your circumstances. Everyone seems to understand this except for the African American Muslim community. And he goes on to back up his claim, saying that these are the facts. 80% of American Muslim converts are African American, and African Americans are dead last in virtually every socioeconomic category that measures the well-being, such as unemployment, access to healthcare, literacy, education, single-parent households, broken families, incarceration rates, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, home ownership, infant mortality, and on and on and on. Virtually all of these categories, you will find that African Americans are in the highest number or doing the poorest in those categories. He goes on to say that African American Muslims, in many ways, are still in a colonial-like existence in this country and also in Islam. And this is partly why the trajectory of Islam in this country is in the state that it is. And he says that in order for us to do for self, we have to first acknowledge and accept our reality and look at us for who we are, and not to paint a picture of who we would like to be or who we think we should be. And he says, he goes on to quote verses from Quran saying that, "O mankind, verily we have created you from male and female, and made you into nations and tribes to know one another. Surely the most honored to you in the sight of Allah are the most pious of you." And so he uses this ayat to support his claim that African American Muslims have a right to identify ourselves as such, and to acknowledge the significance of our culture and our contribution to this country and to Islam in this country. And so I'm going to skip forward a bit, inshallah. He talks about the inferiority complex as the apex of American Muslim slave mentality, which is the aforementioned verse. He quotes a verse saying, "O you who believe, let not some men among you laugh at others. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Nor let some women laugh at others. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Nor defame, nor be sarcastic to each other, nor call each other by offensive names. Ill seeming is a name connotating wickedness, to be used of one after he has believed, and those who do not desist are indeed wrongdoers, amongst the wrongdoers." So he quotes these ayat of Quran, which can be found in the 49th surah of Quran, to show that it is not of our faith, and in fact, it goes against the principles of Islam, that we would degrade one another or look down upon one another because we're different, but rather we should see each other as legitimate and treat each other as equals in Islam as much as we can. And of course, piety is Allah is the judge of whose heart is most pious, and not for us to make difference between one another. He's saying that African American Muslims are told that they're equal, that we're equal parts of the global Muslim community, and therefore we don't have a reason to see ourselves in a distinct context as African American ex-slave community. And that is part of the argument that is used against African Americans anytime we try to acknowledge our culture, our race, ethnicity, our background, our history, and our contribution. He says, you might be asking yourself, shouldn't there just be Muslims and not all these racial and ethnic divisions? The answer is yes, but the reality is that's not the way things are. Failure to acknowledge the truth about your condition And the reality of the dichotomous two Muslim Americas is pretty much the center ground zero of our dilemma. So in other words, we have the principles of Islam, we have the ideals of Islam, and then we have the reality of Islam in America, which is that in principle and in ideal, there should not be any difference amongst the races of Muslims, and ideally, we would not even be having this conversation. But the fact that this is a relevant topic and this is something that we can, I think most of us can acknowledge as a reality, shows that this is part of the struggle that we as a community need to, number one, acknowledge, number two, address, and number three, rectify, inshallah. And he goes on to say, thus, one of the most important institutions that we must take care of and strengthen is the family. So he circles back to his original point, which is that the family unit is where the struggle must begin and end. That until we find a way that we're able to translate this faith down to further generations, that we will continue to have this problem. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Sister Vina, for giving me that notification. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more points that I thought were very important, but I don't want to belabor the point. I would love to open the floor. So inshallah, let's go ahead and do that. I'll open the floor. If anyone has any questions or comments, let's get started, inshallah. I'm seeing. Okay, no, I don't see any questions. So would anyone like to start us off? Please don't be shy, or else I'll start calling on you.
My man. But inshallah, I can start, Brother Abdul Aleem, since everyone wants to take their time to come up with what they want to speak about. But honestly, there's so much I really want to say. I kind of have to calm myself down because like everything he was saying was just like, for me, it's just like yes, 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 yes. And so one part I really want to kind of highlight right now, and like if I have another chance, I'll probably bring up other points, is really in regards to kind of the issue that you already spoke about, which is the African American Muslim community and the community in general having this stigma that they can't acknowledge who they are, right? And then he brings up the verse that that you were just talking about, and I want to kind of just like read again like what he says here. Basically, he says in response to that verse, it is clear that first of all there are differences in race and ethnicities that Allah has created people upon. No one can deny it. No one can deny that. Secondly, it is also clear that from the verse that people should not ascribe themselves to be other than what or who they are. And that part there really spoke to me because I feel like not just African American Muslims, the convert community in general, it's like you, in order to be truly seen as like a true Muslim from the rest of the community, you have to subscribe to a particular culture. You have to like, let go of your own culture and adopt a quote authentic unquote Islamic unquote culture. And if you, and otherwise, you're considered, if you say that you're American, it's frowned upon in the Muslim community. Even though, they're allowed to have, their culture and uphold their culture, because their culture is more Islamic, right? But, if we as Americans, uphold our own culture, we're seen as like, oh, you're following the kuffar, as they always tell us. And I think it's very important for us to understand that we have no reason to be ashamed of who we are or where we come from. There's no reason for us to have to throw that away. We do not have to adopt another culture to be truly Muslim. And I think it's very, very important for new Muslims, especially, not just converts, new Muslims especially, to understand that. Because, and and like we've spoken about this many, many times, the idea that everyone can wear a thobe if they want. One of the reasons why I personally don't wear a thobe is because I want to be able to show it's. I do it almost as a statement for myself to feel like, hey, all because I'm not wearing, the clothing that the Middle Eastern people from the Middle East wear, people from Pakistan wear, people from Somalia wear, doesn't make me any less of a Muslim than you. And I think it's very important for us to acknowledge who we are. Yes, we are Muslim before anything else, but that does not mean that we are no longer American or African American, or we've lost that history, or that they I can't think of the other word, but you get what I'm saying. That we've lost that history, or that connection. And I feel like a lot of times, some of us feel like we have to let go of everything, but we don't. And it's very important for us to understand that it's through upholding not only our Islam, but from our cultures, where we can show the rest of our community that Islam is an asset. It's not something that's going to transform you to to a different culture. We reject from the culture that it goes against the religion, but everything else, alhamdulillah, we should embrace it.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, brother. Kenneth, very, very valid points. There's 3 hands raised. I don't know which order. I'll call on Sister Rashida first, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. So where do we begin? I've been Muslim. It'll be this month. It'll be 25 years.
Allahu Akbar.
Inshallah. So to your point about us searching and seeking out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, looking for that tawheed was what brought me to Islam. And there were certain things that, alhamdulillah, Allah never had me struggle with. The hijab I started wearing before I even took shahada.
Allah.
So and so I have been on this journey. I have been practicing this deen. I have been, in fact, when I took shahada, it was just before Ramadan. And so from the very beginning, I alhamdulillah, Allah made it easy for me to practice this faith and pray every day, 5 times a day, even at work, fast. So, I mean, I am practicing this religion. So when he talks about not having to qualify ourselves as Muslims, etc., I can really relate to that, because this is definitely about my relationship with my Creator, period. That said, I have taken notice of the Muslims, the African American Muslims who are generational Muslims, right? 2nd generation, 3rd generation. And I have seen a difference in education. The fact that in Islam, we're supposed to educate ourselves. So I find that there are children, and this may be just my perception, but their children seem to be more educated on a whole, as a whole. They tend to marry and stay married, and so there are things that generationally I am seeing, that there has been this quote unquote improvement, right? And I think his point about, us as African Americans, you're layering on Islam on top of a whole history of oppression, yes. A whole history of things that were totally the opposite of what Islam is. Yes. And so, that's, you just can't put Islam on top of that, is basically what I'm understanding him to say, is that you have to deal with those underlying issues in order to really be successful in this religion. That's right. Now, that's it. He talks about the fact that, he's noticing, and he is a generational Muslim. He mentioned his Ummi, right? Right. That he's seeing issues. And that, I believe, is societal, right? We live in a non-Muslim society. That is totally different than people who come here from a Muslim country who have been generationally Muslim, right? So there are going to be those things that are going to pull at our children more so than, it would happen overseas. So I'm sure that there are people who have come here who have seen their children stray because of the environment. And so to your point about what is it that we need to do as a whole, right? It's not just African Americans. As a whole, as a Muslim community, to ensure that our children are strong in this faith. And I'll stop there.
You know, I wanted to make a quick point that I was thinking as you were talking about us, the importance of acknowledging the history that we have in this country and some of the luggage or baggage that we bring to Islam. I think part of the reason why many converts to Islam end up leaving, and he makes a point in this chapter that chances are a person is not going to stay in Islam, a convert to Islam, the odds are that you're not going to make it. And I think part of the reason for that is not because there's any flaw in the faith, but I think there's some underlying issues that we as a community have neglected to address in convert Muslims, especially that some of the baggage that we bring from the dunya and from Jahiliyyah, from the life that we had before Islam, you know, they don't magically go away just because we take Shahada. You know, we still have many of the same problems. And while we do accept the faith and we believe in Allah and His Messenger and in the books and everything, in all of the points of Iman, we struggle with those issues and they go unaddressed, which ultimately in many cases leads to people leaving the faith altogether. So, Brother Abdul Rashid, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
First up, my understanding is that there is no such thing as Islamic culture or Muslim culture. It's just the faith. But I'm one of those guys the brother talked about. I've been a Muslim more or less 20, 25 years, but I left the faith. I was one of the, I left the faith because a lot of things were going in my life, but I bounced around from masjid to masjid to masjid. And a lot of them were immigrant majority ones. So I didn't feel quote unquote comfortable because there weren't enough brothers or sisters who looked like myself. So, you know, little by little, I moved further and further away. And you know, alhamdulillah, I'm back. And in my journey back, you know, where I live in Long Island, you know, there's 101 masjids. I tell you, I kid you not. And they're all seem to be segregated, which is crazy. But I specifically chose an African American majority masjid to join. And out of all the masjids in my neighborhood or in my immediate area, it's probably one of the most poorish one. It's very small. You know, they're struggling to pay the bills. It's not very big. You know, they don't have a big internet footprint, but they're doing the best they can. I'm trying to do as much as I can to help them, inshallah. But you know, you know, like the sister said, you know, we can't just think that just because we've accepted the faith that all of a sudden all our answers are there and that things are going to be better for us. We have to treat ourselves better, and then in turn, the immigrant population and community will treat us better. But it's so funny and it's so ironic that you know, like Brother Kenneth, I'm reading and I was trying not to jump ahead, but I'm reading everything the brother said in the book. You know, I've seen or I've experienced, and I'm like, this is just spot on. And inshallah, I can't wait to get to more of it and talk to you guys all about it.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Brother Abdul Rashid, that I mean, for many of us, like you said, we have battles and struggles with Islam. I mean, we all do, whether convert or not, doesn't matter. Everyone does. But I think it's something that we convert Muslims and American Muslims, African American Muslims, need to validate our experience and validate our history and validate that, you know, the things that affect us and impact us, because the reality is, as the Imam mentioned in the book, we are about 80% of all the converts in this country. I mean, that's a large portion of the community. So
Yes.
we have a valid place, even if that number weren't true. We have a valid place. Sister Jackie, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So these two chapters had me thinking about a lot of things, and especially what you were saying about community. Unfortunately, I've heard multiple times from born Muslims, you know, and this is not exact quote, but like basically like warning me against the Black Muslim community, but then stating, but if it's a good Black Muslim, they're the best Muslims. And I don't know if anyone has heard this, but it's such dangerous language. And this is, I think this is like what makes the unwelcoming in the community so so vast and so expansive and damaging, is because you're putting a duality on a human being, right? And that's so, it's, human beings aren't good or bad. There's, you know, you allow for characteristics and human traits for other people, but not like one other, like another race. And so you can't do that to an entire race, because humans are dynamic, right? It's not just good or bad or this. So I think that's part of like one of the reasons why finding a place in the Muslim community for African Americans is so difficult, and it's something that we need to eradicate from our community. But I do think within the chapter, it was chapter 2 where the author outlined all of the choices that we have as Muslims. Alhamdulillah, I found that extremely empowering, because he did it in a way where he recognized that choice has been taken away from African Americans throughout this country for decades or for hundreds of years, but there are choices that you can make to improve your life, right? And so instead of focusing on, you know, or like as you're healing from that, but instead of focusing on the lack of choice, he gives an alternative of all of these things that you can do in your faith that will empower you and make your life better. And that's a reminder for everybody. And I really enjoyed that part of the chapter. I don't know what page it's on because I'm on a Kindle. It's like it's 13%.
Okay, it's page 16. Page 16.
Alhamdulillah, that's a beautiful passage.
And it really is. But I'm sorry.
No, just lastly, I just also like the connection that the author made where, you know, in caring for the African American community, not only are we caring for a convert community, but we're caring for the Muslim community. That's 33% of Muslims in this country. And so it's important to put it in that context and to really to drive that in, because I don't think the overall Muslim community sees it that way. And that's it. And thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sister Jackie. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I was trying to get to that section where he asked those rhetorical questions or made those observations, and I'll just read a few to your point. He says that brothers who work and spend money to support their families are better men in a key area of manhood than those who don't, yet try to live off their he says, yet try to live off their wives, and that's a choice. Sisters who are obedient and dutiful to their husband in what is right tend to be more spiritually stable than those who don't, and that's a choice. People who take the time out to learn a little something of their religion instead of sitting in front of a TV all day or playing a Wii or seeking to be entertained all the time tend to be more religiously intuitive than those who don't, and that's a choice. And he goes on and on and on. He really points out many of the decisions that we make as Muslims and how dedicated and serious we are about our deen, our faith, and how those choices have a great impact on our success as Muslims. And we all know that, you know, there's a very popular verse in Quran, in translation, Allah says that he would not change the condition of a people until they first change their heart or change themselves. And so these questions or these observations he's making go directly at that point, that we are making decisions every day as Muslims. And the result of those choices has a great impact on our success in Islam. So, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. Thank you for that comment. I thought I saw Sister Rashida's hand again. Did I imagine that, or?
I may have not have taken it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay, inshallah. Is any other comment anyone would like to make or question? So he, Bismillah.
No, I was just saying we have a big crowd, mashallah, so I'm sure we can. Don't be shy, guys.
Yeah.
So all I would really further add, because Sister Jackie said exactly what I kind of wanted to say about the part that she didn't get to go over, the concept of choice. And I also found that part to be very, very empowering. That I think, one, of course, like acknowledging the reality of the situation, and that really kind of spoke to me as well. The emotions, like, we have to recognize the reality of the situation, because many times, as everyone knows, Embrace is primarily a convert care and empowerment organization, and we don't shy from that. And many times we get this comment of like, why do you guys say convert? Just call me Muslim. I'm a Muslim. I'm just a Muslim. Don't call me convert. And I always tell people, like, yes, I understand that. You're absolutely right. We should just be Muslim. We shouldn't need to have these labels as convert and things of that nature. But the fact of the matter is, we have to accept the reality. And the reality is, whether you're whether or not you call yourself a convert, or you call yourself, African American, even if it's not said, that's how people see you. That's just how it's seen, right? I mean, for example, I remember I mentioned this once. Like, my name, as you guys know, my name is Kenneth. So I go say, Assalamu alaikum, my name is Kenneth, to another Muslim, wa alaikum assalam. 9 times out of 10, the question is going to be, are you a convert? 9 times out of 10, because, my name's not, a Muslim name or Arabic name. And so it's kind of one, understanding and not shying away from the reality. But number 2, from my personal point of view, being African American Muslim, being a convert Muslim, we should not shy away from those labels. If anything, I think these labels we should embrace, and we should actually feel empowered by having those labels. Like you mentioned, Brother Abdul Aleem, many of us who convert, it's because it was our choice. It was through learning the deen and gaining that knowledge and making that step to basically make a huge change in your life. That's something you should be proud of as a convert. So to me, like, that should not, you shouldn't shy away from that. And being African American Muslim, like he mentioned in the book, that African American Muslims have the longest history here than any other Muslim. African American Muslims have been through it all, and have overcame all those different challenges. That should be acknowledged. That shouldn't be shied away from, right?
Very good point, brother. Jazakallah khair. Sister Mary, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I had a question. You had said 2 quotes from the Quran, like from Surah 49. Do you have the ayah numbers on those?
It's 49:11.
Okay, and then the other one too. There was another one.
Yeah, there's a second quote from Quran. Let me see if I can find that ayat. 49:13.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I haven't got the book yet. I'm gonna get it on my Kindle soon, inshallah. So I'm taking notes. But what I wanted to say sometimes too, like for me, especially like, my ex-husband's from Palestine. I went to Palestine, many times, and people there are like so shocked that I would convert to Islam, and they're like, so, oh my gosh, really? And it's like, and then, but then they're like, oh, you know how to pray? Oh, you know how to, you know Quran? And I was like, yeah. And they're just like so shocked. I think here now, there's the immigrants now are used to the converts or the reverts, but over there, sometimes they're just like so, like, just like amazed that I would that we convert. I'm like, yeah, there's lots of Muslims that convert, but alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that. I was like,
Exactly. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is a very good point. That in other parts of the world, there's a perception of America and Americans that we, that we're not Muslim, or or even worse, that we're kuffar. So it is an eye-opening experience for many people, other parts of the world, that Islam is a very much a central thread in the fabric of America. That, like I mentioned, Islam has been in this country as from its very inception. That as long as, I think it goes back probably to the 15th or 16th century, that Muslims have been here, and to some extent, and to the extent that we could, African Americans have borne the burden. I wouldn't call it a burden, but the responsibility of practicing Islam. And in some cases, it was a real burden, or a real trial, I would say. And that, even though we were cut off from that history and from that heritage, and forced into other religions or systems of belief, we have consistently, as a community, tried to find our way back to Islam. And I think that's reflective in this country, that African Americans make up about, I'd say about 13% of the US population. And the author goes on to say that in this country, Muslims are about 2% of the population, and of that 2%, African Americans are a third of all the Muslims in this country. So it's it's pretty significant to say the least, that African American Muslims are legitimate, and we have a rightful place to Islam and in Islam in this country, and overall, and that we should not feel ashamed or embarrassed or even inferior in any way, because we may not have the technicality of Islam. And that was one of the points I wanted to bring out, is that when you think about the technical aspects of Islam, you think about the fiqh and usul hadith and tafsir, and maybe our tajweed is not the best, or and all these different technical aspects of Islam. We should not overlook the fact that we're strong in faith, and many of us have endured great hardships that have opened doors for immigrant Muslims and other Muslims today to stand up and say openly that I am a Muslim. Someone paid that price, because there was a time in this country where you could not openly express your faith, and you could not openly go to a masjid or pray 5 times or call the adhan or do all of these other things that we have come to take for granted today. there was a price paid for that. And for a large part, for the majority, that price was paid by African-American Muslims in this country. So we need to embrace that history. And we also need to acknowledge that along with that beautiful part about history, that there is some baggage. There is not some, there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of I would say, challenges that we come to Islam with. But I believe that the community as a whole, if we were to accept and embrace each other despite our shortcomings, that we would be a stronger community overall. Brother Abdul Rashid, inshallah.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what you were just saying. Like, African Americans are the backbone of the faith in this country. I mean, like you said, without us, no one would be practicing Islam right now. And it's so ironic that that's the fact. But when you show the face of Islam in America today, it's not an African American face. When you talk about the most prominent imams and scholars in the United States, very few are African American. When you talk about the the communities in the United States, the picture of those communities is not ones that look like you and I, which is very unfortunate. Because, as we stated, without us, without our sacrifice, we wouldn't be here. And it's the question I ask myself all the time, but it's the question you ask yourself in general. As African Americans who have been here since the beginning, we're always seem to be on the bottom or getting the short end of the stick. And in particular to Islam, until we get our house together, until we get recognized and come together, then we're always going to be in a situation that we're in now. And I think it's the job of the converts, black, white, and every other color. Those are the ones that are going to save the faith, just like the converts originally brought us the faith with the Prophet Muhammad.
Jazakallah. Thank you for that beautiful comment, brother. Brother Hasib Abdali, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I just like to add a point, which Sherman Jackson noted in his book, is that African American Muslims are the only indigenous Muslim majority community in Western Hemisphere. If you look around all the other countries in Europe, for example, like take example of UK, the majority of Muslims are South Asian. Or in German, you'll find Turks. Or in French, you'll find those Africans. United States is the only place where we have indigenous Muslims who have been here for the last 400 years. And this is the uniqueness of this society. They were 90% in 1965. 90% of the American Muslims were African American Muslims in the early 60s. And that percentage is decreasing, but still it is 1/3 of the Muslim population. So this is so African Americans have a great status to make the change in the society. As we all know that the native people are the most suitable candidate for spreading Deen, teaching Islam, and so this is so anyway. I'm repeating what I have said, is that those are the unique character of African American Muslim community.
Thank you. Jazakallah. Thank you, Brother Hasib. Okay, so with that, we're gonna get ready to close out. I will show the I'll try to show the book again, inshallah.
Yeah, it's hard to see it with your green screen thing on, I think.
Yeah.
There we go.
I had it. It's called Double-Edged Slavery by Imam Luqman Ahmed, How African American Muslims have been colonized. Yeah. So If you have not picked up a copy of this book, please do. It is the book itself is very short it's only a couple hundred pages, but subhanAllah, every page is like a treasure. You know, I think there's so much more that we're going to cover that will invoke very thought-provoking conversations, and hopefully will make a difference in how we see each other and how we treat each other. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the wisdom that we can see each other as equals in Islam, and to help our brother and sister in Islam, regardless of their ethnicity or background, to become better Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen the brotherhood and the sisterhood, that we see each other as equals, and practice the faith as it was taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this gathering, bless all of those who are participating, and bless the author of this book. May this be a sadaqah jariyah for him, and all of those who contributed to make this work come forward. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, next week we will pick up on chapters 3 and 4. So it'll be next week, Tuesday, chapters 3 and 4. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again next week. And please spread the word about this reading. It's a very important conversation. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Good job today, Brother Abdul Aleem.
Jazakallah.